But is this new policy, are any such policies effective? One of my guests today writes that league policies are driven by a, quote, dark hypocrisy designed to simply make the screaming stop. Quote, player conduct policies are about image control, crisis management, and public relations with an added dash of labor control. They are not about making players better people. Diana Moskovitz wrote that and much more, along with outstanding reporting at Deadspin, under the headline, Zero Tolerance Will Only Make It Worse. And Shannon Carroll is an editor with the Pittsburgh Sporting News, and she writes, quote, I'm sick of the NFL charade that it takes these type of allegations seriously. We note that we did invite the National Football League and the Giants to be with us today. Both the team and the NFL declined our invitation. Ladies, good to have you here. All right, Diana, how does a league which expended so much effort, so many high-profile hires in this area over the last 2 years, find itself in this situation?
Well, I think it shows, for one, just how difficult it is to build a culture where domestic violence is taken seriously. And at least for me, what really stands out from all those police reports with Molly Brown is that she flat out was telling police, I don't trust the NFL. Now, how can the NFL help victims if they're saying, we don't trust you? At that point, what can they do? I don't know, because without trust, you can't do anything.
Well, Shannon, we see the campaign Football is Family for the National Football League. You say flat out in your recent column, essentially, you don't trust the league here. What's been the evolution of your thinking going back 2 years to the Ray Rice moments, which were dark days for the league? All the reforms they say they've instituted, all the hires, so many qualified people, and here we are today. What's been the evolution of your thinking?
I really see it as hypocrisy. The league claims it cares about women, it claims that it cares about issues like domestic violence, but nothing it's done, even in the last 2 years, has shown that. With the one-game suspension of Josh Brown, why should I believe them? You know, the NFL seems to see this as a PR issue. Here, let's just push rhinestone-encrusted T-shirts as women and make it better, but the NFL is treating women like we're stupid, and we're not stupid.
How does zero tolerance, Diana, make this even worse, in your opinion?
Well, the main concern is that we know that unemployment is a factor in domestic violence. It's been on checklists for danger assessments for decades now. This is a fact. And so you run the risk that if a victim knows her husband is going to immediately lose his job if he comes forward, that's just going to give her another reason to suck it up, to bury it, to put on the concealer, and to say she fell down the stairs. I know that's not a very fun thing to think about, but especially with domestic violence, where this is something that can hide in the shadows, because it happens in the privacy of the home, a huge part is just creating an environment where victims feel comfortable coming forward so that they can get help. And unfortunately, that does mean that you don't want to immediately start throwing pitchforks every time someone comes forward, because you just run the risk of victims keeping it to themselves. It doesn't feel good to think this way, I admit that, but
it's very nuanced.
Something that needs to be taken into consideration.
It's very nuanced.
It is.
I asked the sheriff of King County earlier this week, I believe it was, whether indeed the NFL was equipped to conduct investigations. He said, as a professional commanding officer in law enforcement, he thought that was the case. But talk about some of the reporting you've done in employment situations about the methodology and the treatment here of what the NFL is. They've bitten off a lot here.
They have, and I think it's important to point out that even one of the NFL's consultants, Jane Randall, she had done a lot of work in the past on what were guidelines for employers to do. Admittedly, this is a very new area, so this is an area where people are still figuring things out, but she said in her experience at Liz Claiborne, they found the best thing to do was to basically, create a culture where people were comfortable coming forward, where they felt like they could get help, and then when they did, they would immediately refer them out to services. That a big thing was just knowing, what's the best shelter, what's the best counselors, what's the best services, so they could immediately put any victims or any batterers potentially in contact with them and start getting help immediately.
But the national
she
media
actually,
aren't looking at Liz Claiborne the way that we in this program and columnists such as you guys are looking at the National Football League. They operate in a bit of a PR vacuum in that regard.
Right, and it is admittedly different. Working for Liz Claiborne is different than working for the NFL. I think we can all agree to that. But I don't think it means that you can dismiss the points that raised and these broader concerns, again, about if victims come forward. When Molly Brown got a call from the NFL investigator, she immediately called the officer, I'm sorry, I should say the deputy she was talking to, saying, I don't trust this person, I don't know who it is, I'm not even going to call them back. So I think that alone should be setting off huge red flags. Is this working? What's going on? What's the point? Again, if victims are saying we don't trust them, and they have very good reasons to not trust them, frankly.
Shannon, for all the complexity that exists on this topic, and I think Diana and you have laid it out, for one, and you've said it, you're entirely skeptical of the league. Concretely, how can they regain your confidence, if at all?
Well, I think it stems with the fact that the NFL says it has a mandated 6-game suspension and haven't really seen much of that. So I think for the league to kind of gain my trust back and the trust of several other NFL viewers, they have to stick to the script that they're putting out there. So if it's 6 games, it's 6 games. And if it's not 6 games, I want to know why. I want to know why Josh Brown only got 1 game.
Well, it's the question that redounds, and we'll be continuing to ask it and wait to see what happens. We'll talk about the league in just a second. Diana Moskovitz, Shannon Carroll, thank you so much for being here. So what now for the Giants and the NFL? And Andrew Brandt's column on the Monday Morning Quarterback website, he sees landmines for both the Giants